From Fox 8 Sports, this is the Overtime Podcast.
From the Fox 8 studios in New Orleans, it's the Fox 8 Overtime Podcast. I am your host, Sean Fazende, riding shotgun as he does each and every podcast. Is Andre Johnson
Jr.
Do not forget the Jr. It's very important to remember the JR at the end of the name. Before we get into today's content, be sure to like, share, rate, and review. If you are watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, get the bell notification. But when we drop that fire content, and also hello to the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network. We know you're out there. We know you're watching us, and we are thankful you have found us here on this brand new network. Today, it is Friday, and it has been a difficult, challenging start to the year 2025. That is the reason why you did not see a podcast on Wednesday. Andre and I both felt getting into sports-centric topics on a day like, I guess, was it Wednesday morning, late Tuesday night, was just not appropriate. So we're gonna start with that because we can't ignore it. It's just too big of what's happened, and we were out there. We saw you were out there, certain press conferences. I was out and about. The tragedy that unfolded on New Year's 3:15 in the morning with the terrorist attack on Bourbon Street. Still surreal. Wednesday was a very surreal day, a very sad day when I drove home. I got off late that night, about 11:30. We did Game Plan live that night, and Game Plan is the show. You probably, if some of y'all follow me on social media, I'll post the bloopers from that. Juan and I really cut up on that show. It's it's always the show because it's far enough away from the last game and far enough away from the game coming up where we can just kind of let loose a little bit. It's not as serious. But we acknowledged at the open of that show we're not getting goofy, we're not getting crazy on this show. It's too many lives were harmed, and it just was a surreal start to 2025. And I still have the image of that car turning from Canal Street, booking it up the sidewalk, and just probably gunning about 50, 60 miles an hour and just mowing down people as they're enjoying New Year's, as they should be in the city of like New Orleans on New Year's Eve, having a good time and enjoying everything that Bourbon Street has to offer. So it just was a very sad, very surreal day. And I still haven't fully processed it because it's just there's a lot still going on, but it just was a rough day.
Yeah, it was crazy. Wednesday morning, I actually got the call. They needed me to head out to, it's all hands on deck. We're here at the news station. So I was out, on Canal around Bourbon Street Wednesday morning, kind of helping to work the aftermath. And I've honestly never seen anything like that before. You've got SWAT teams, FBI, police, sheriff's office, just every, law enforcement agency that you can possibly think of. They're out there. And at the same time, you've got a lot of Sugar Bowl fans, Georgia fans, Notre Dame fans walking around. You had some people who were confused. They didn't even know what happened. They're like, why can't I go here? I'm trying to get breakfast. Some people lived in Bourbon. Some people were trying to go to work in Bourbon, and it's just certain areas were blocked off and they couldn't get there, and it's obviously a tragedy for everybody who was involved, the families, just everybody in that situation. Our thoughts definitely go out to them, and it was just a really, really crazy time.
Yeah, and then look, this is an international story now. This is terrorism kind of arrived at our doorstep, and look, we have in New Orleans. We've seen all kind of craziness. I mean, it's sad to say we've seen shootings, bad shootings. We've seen all kind of natural disasters, all kind of craziness. I don't recall an act of terror in my lifetime in this form. And yet here we are. And it was it's New Year's Eve into New Year's on Bourbon Street. Obviously it was a planned, premeditated attack on our way of life. And I got to say, it was a tragedy just to watch, some things unfold. But we got to say, law enforcement has taken a lot of heat over the years. They were awesome on this day. They were all present. You saw the video of them all running towards the truck. There was that lift or whatever in the middle of the road that kind of veered them off. And then I don't know if you saw that one video where a police officer was shot as they're shooting back. And obviously they were able to take out the suspect who would have wreaked a lot more havoc had he been able to keep shooting. Let's just put it that way. So thoughts and prayers with everyone affected. Thoughts and prayers for our city, and a huge token of appreciation for law enforcement, first responders, because y'all did a heck of a job. I wanted to get to this really quick before we get into the big picture today because I was at Saints camp on Wednesday, and you can imagine New Year's, it's been a rough year. You wake up and you got to go to practice, and what just happened. And I'm sure their phones are ringing off the hook. I'm sure, you're trying to process what's happening. You're trying to locate what's happening. Because, look, I mean, the majority of the players are probably in, and they're going to go, to practice the next day. But, Saints organization, they could have people out and about on the town. So you're looking around, trying to figure out everything. Everybody was accounted for. But I should have articulated this a little bit better Wednesday. I was mad at myself for not doing so when I got home Wednesday night. Darren Rizzi was fantastic in his press conference. So he didn't get credit for it. He needs to. He was fantastic in his press conference. He set the perfect tone. Didn't sound generic, like he just wanted to get through all the, the generic stuff you would say in a tragic situation just because he kind of thought he had to. No, he didn't do that at all. He personalized it in a way that was impactful, but didn't make it about him. The 9/11 connection was deep. I mean, you can certainly connect with that. When he brought up the two friends lost with the Twin Towers, and then sharing the story of his son being out and about as a 20-something-year-old young man should be in the city on New Year's Eve. Great day, great weather. Go out, enjoy yourself, celebrating. Him waking up and not seeing his son in his bed, scared to death, and was able to finally locate him. And that hit really home for me because, I mean, my kids aren't old to go out yet, but it's going to be here before you know it. And when you got kids, you understand what that means when there's that just brief second or two where you're just not sure and you just think the worst. So I totally connected with him. Then, that's what really hit me. So I want to give Rizzi credit. And look, I have to say this. There are aspects of his personality beyond wins and losses, beyond X's and O's. And I thought Wednesday was a perfect illustration of this. He's a natural leader. He's got natural head coach material. I don't know if it's going to be here. But you can see why people gravitate to him. That's not an easy situation to do, and not everybody can do it. Not everybody's bad people for not being able to do it. But I thought Rizzi came across as very genuine, very sincere, and I thought he handled the press conference fantastic.
Definitely. You hear the term, quote unquote, one of us.
Yeah.
Darren Rizzi's not from New Orleans. He was not born and raised in Louisiana, but in that moment, it was like he was one of us. He's somebody who's lived here for several years, and like it really hit him like, this is his home, and his home was attacked. He mentioned, my son was down there. My daughter was just in town the week before, and she was in Bourbon, so it's just kind of one of those, this could happen to anybody's situations. And I think he did strike the right tone because there are other coaches who, are coaching in an area, but they don't necessarily represent the culture, the thought process of that area. Darren Rizzi showed Wednesday that he understood, and I give a credit to Rizzi for that. And we also talked to Tyrann Mathieu, obviously someone who's from the city, and it was more of a somber mood for Tyrann Mathieu when we talked to him. To Mario Davis, somebody else who's always a deep thinker, and he
man of faith, strong man of faith.
He put it into perspective as well. So just shout out to the Saints leaders for kind of stepping to the forefront of this and, really understanding the situation.
And look, when the city mourns, the Saints organization is who they usually turn to kind of go from darkness to light. So they'll have something to play for this Sunday in Tampa. I got to be honest. Game feels really meaningless right now. I remember going to the Saints camp yesterday, and I remember we did the game plan show Wednesday night. And I remember our topics from that Monday and the things that transpired in between. None of it. And we were talking quite a bit of stuff Monday night about the organization, the future, blah, blah, blah. By the time we did the Wednesday night show, none of it mattered because of what we were dealing with in the city. So eventually you pick up the pieces and eventually you move on. And the Saints do have a job to do, and I do expect them to do that job to the best of their ability. I don't know if it's going to be a win or a loss. It's going to be tough to win, but I do think they set the right tone. So we'll just kind of leave that there, and now we'll make the awkward shift to football topics because it's what we do. It is what we do, and there's never going to be a good time to transition to football, but at some point you just got to do it. For instance, the Sugar Bowl is being played yesterday, so we all understand at some point you have to get back to what was your way of life and before the tragedy. So that's where we're going to go now. because of, speaking of head coaches, there was a popular name brought up on Tuesday, I believe it was, or Monday, and it was going to be the topic of our Wednesday pod before all this happened. So that's what we're going to go with the big picture.
Yep, the hot name that's entering the coaching cycle is one Jon Gruden. Jon Gruden, obviously, former coach of the Raiders. He won a Super Bowl in Tampa Bay in his first year there. And we know he's been linked to the Saints in sort of an advisor role. We've seen him out at, training camp and practice at certain times. So while Jon Gruden's name has not specifically been linked to the Saints job, it is being reported that Jon Gruden is going to be a hot name in this coaching cycle. And with the Saints being one of the teams who will need a head coach coming up, the Saints have been linked to Gruden in the past. So you got to ask the question, how would you feel about Jon Gruden being the next head coach of the New Orleans Saints?
All right, I'm going to lay out some stuff, and I don't want people to think to go, how people are. I mean, I'm going to just listen to the whole thing before you jump to a conclusion, because I'm glad you clarified that, because I went back and read it, and it was more, I don't know if you'd call it a report. It was more like a back and forth between Tom Pelissero and, was it Peter Schrager maybe, of the NFL Network. And he said, a surprise name could be Jon Gruden, whose name could be thrown back into the mix of certain head coaching opportunities. So, of course, we're going to go there. And because they specifically mentioned that he could have had the Saints OC job, I guess a couple of years ago, maybe this year. I don't know which year it was, but he decided not to. So let's go there. First off, we got to talk about the scandal, because that's why he's not coaching. That's why he's not available, right? That's why he's I guess is available right now. We all remember the scandal from a few years back. Had to resign over insensitive emails that came out of that were leaked out from an investigation into the Washington football team, I believe it was. I'd have to go back and refresh my memory in terms of how the process came, where the emails were found. And obviously, it was a scandal, and it rocked the NFL. And he had to resign out a season where they were winning games. I think they were 3-2 at the time, so they were winning football games, and it was the best start that he had to a season with the Raiders, or at least the way they were on track for that. So don't freak out over me saying this, but we know the scandal. We've all heard it. That was back in 2021 or 2022, one of the two. 21. So we're 3.5 years out. Let me just say this. I don't think the Saints would completely take him off the list because of the scandal. Because the Saints were one of the first teams. In fact, I think they were the first team to kind of welcome him back to an NFL practice, to an NFL facility. First, just kind of coming out and observing. Then, as an advisory role back in 2023, he did some consulting with them. And I got to be honest, if there were any backlash against him being there, I really didn't see it. There could have been a couple national articles here and there that would have brought it up, and then just the fact that he's in the mix right now, or his name's out right now, I'm sure there's going to be some people in the national media that bring that up. But I didn't really see a whole lot of backlash, and I think this is key because, as you guys know, I go to all of these things. I go to all these practices. I go to all training camp practices, mini camp practices, OTA practices. This is key. I'm not telling you what I think or what I heard. I'm telling you what I physically saw. I watched him interact with players, big-time players on this team. Demario Davis, I believe. Derek Carr, obviously someone he has a connection to. Alvin Kamara, Michael Thomas at the time. We're talking about some big-time names in the organization. And I really did not sense any awkwardness, any hesitation, any kind of, cringe-type stuff from the guys based off of that. Matter of fact, I got to go back and look. Maybe we can find it at some point. I remember, I think it was AK even complimented him in a press conference after one of the practices he was at. Just some of the stuff he was picking the brain. Gruden is such a big personality. It's hard to not get on his level when he talks about football because he loves it so much. And then, honestly, there's the argument, well, the scandal came. He paid a huge price for it. Have they moved far enough past it to where maybe he kind of did his time and was punished, and maybe that's on the back burner. But just because, so let me just say, I don't think the Saints would say, oh, he did a scandal, he's out. But just because they wouldn't be afraid of the scandal for looking into him, that doesn't mean they should hire him. That does not mean they should hire him. I got no problem with them looking into him or looking into Gruden as a potential head coaching candidate. I really don't. They got to do their due diligence, and they really need to find the right guy. And, you know, on the plus side, he's got that presence about him. I have talked about presence for how long now? I mean, I've talked about
your number one
I
thing,
need
really.
somebody that walks in the room and commands respect. I need it. Has that relationship with Derek Carr. Now, you could say Derek Carr's relationship with the organization may be tenuous, but I still think he's going to be here next year. We'll find out more details later. And to be frank, he's got some box office to him. You know, he's a name. He's a guy you recognize. And given how stale this organization has been over the last few years, they haven't just been bad. They've just been mediocre and stale. You can make a case that could be an asset when looking at a guy like Jon Gruden. But on the flip side, and this is really what it boils down to, I'm just not sure he's a good NFL coach anymore. He's a good enough coach to warrant the publicity or to warrant the attention you're going to get. The last winning season he had as a head coach where he worked the full season was 2007. A long time ago. 2007 was a long time ago.
7th grade.
And look, his offense really was the basis for a lot of other offenses to build off of. I mean, even Peyton's offense was a version of the Gruden West Coast offense, and you can say all these other guys have built off of the Gruden offense. I think at one time it was innovative, but I'm just not sure it still is that innovative, cutting-edge offense. I think in some ways it's become a little bit outdated. I mean, we saw a little bit of that with Peyton last year. It kind of felt a little outdated with what he was trying to do, and we'll see how he finishes off this year in Denver. He always evolved with the young quarterback. I think also Gruden's kind of become a little bit bigger than the game in some ways. His presence, while I like it, I like a guy that has a presence. Sometimes that can take over a room, and you better be successful when you take over a room like that. And that could, at times, when you have such a big presence, I know this was an issue sometimes with Peyton. Sometimes that can stifle creativity because you're almost always trying to please the guy who's got the biggest presence as opposed to maybe being somewhat critical. And look, let's not kid ourselves and think that everyone would just be over the scandal. There could be some resentment from the scandal, from factions within the locker room, although I think at that point they would probably have done their due diligence to weed some of that out. So to be clear, I haven't gotten any official word at all that the Saints plan to interview Gruden, that Gruden's on their list, that Gruden is a guy they're considering. In fact, the report we're even referencing had no mention of the Saints interviewing Jon Gruden. They just said Gruden, and they mentioned the Saints because he could have had the Saints OC job a couple years ago, which I can somewhat agree with, or I buy that. In other words, I understand that that report is probably factual. So if they are looking into him, so be it. But ultimately, I think there are likely better options given what this team needs going forward than Jon Gruden.
Yeah, my question ultimately comes down to, is it worth it? Because
that's it, right.
You bring Jon Gruden in, there's going to be backlash. You're going to be in the headlines across the NFL, and it's not going to be for good reasons. There's going to be a lot of people, because he said a lot of things and offended a lot of different people with the emails that were linked. So there's going to be a lot of people who are like, how could you give this guy a job? How could you want this guy to represent your organization as the face of your franchise, yada, yada, yada. There's going to be a lot of backlash that this city and this team takes. Now, is that something that Mickey Loomis and Gail Benson would choose to do? I think it is something they would potentially be okay with, but it's going to come with a lot. But then the question after that is, you're bringing in all this backlash. Is Jon Gruden a coach that can lead you to the promised land with a roster like this in 2025? I don't know that he is, because when you look at Jon Gruden, he has a 117 and 112 record in the NFL, 5-4 in the postseason.
Got the Super Bowl.
It's good. It's not bad. It's around average record. He did get the Super Bowl, but it's not like he arrived and built up an organization to win that Super Bowl. That was Tony Dungy's team.
Yeah.
He won it in his first year in Tampa, and when he got to Tampa was a ready-made situation for a coach to come in and win a Super Bowl. Not trying to devalue that Super Bowl, but that was Tony Dungy's team that he led to a Super Bowl, so it is important to mention that as well. He had a second chance in Oakland, which eventually moved to Vegas. The Raiders, they were Oakland in 18 and 19, the Vegas Raiders in 2021. Jon Gruden over there for 3 seasons and some change. 2018, 4-12, 2019, 7-9, 2020, 8-8. 2021, he was 3-2. Saints could do 4-12 all by themselves. The Saints, I mean, Dennis Allen could do 7-9 and 8-8.
Mm-hmm.
You know, is Jon Gruden the guy who can come in and turn this franchise around? If you want to base it off his most recent coaching stint, what makes you believe that? I mean, even if you take the Tampa team that he won a Super Bowl with, he was in Tampa for several years after winning that Super Bowl, and they only made the playoffs twice. They even had some losing records after that Super Bowl. So Jon Gruden in today's game in 2025, things have changed a lot from 08 or 07 to 25. You know, to take a basketball analogy, in 2007, you could probably run the triangle system and have a lot of success. You're not running the triangle system in 2025. Nope. There's a lot of coaching theories, and I mean, he's a great football mind, but is he a football mind that has developed with the game that he has not been actively coaching? If you look at his stint in Oakland and in Vegas, the answer would be no. So bringing somebody in who I can't confidently say is a good football coach in 2025. All of his accolades are almost 20 years ago.
Yeah, that's it.
When I was in middle school, like, is he a good enough coach in 2025 to warrant all of the backlash and the hate and the vitriol that you're going to get by bringing Jon Gruden into this organization? Right now, my answer is no.
I think that's ultimately where it ends up. I mean, his name got floated out there. His name, if you remember, even before the scandal, when he was at Monday Night Football, ESPN for years, which is really where he kind of built that. Like, he was a good coach, but when he got to ESPN, he really built the persona of a football guy. And I still miss him on Monday Night Football. I thought he was really good on Monday Night Football.
He was an incredible analyst.
I loved him on Monday Night Football. You could just tell that guy eats, sleeps, and breathes football. So anyway, I'm not sure where I was going with that, but he's a guy that frankly, that's where he built it up. But it's almost like he's become almost like a caricature of a football coach. Like, he's really bought into, I know he's doing with the Barstool stuff. So I think he could potentially adapt to today's game, but it takes a lot of like self-reflection and a lot. Look, these guys have egos. They all have egos, especially when you've had success. I mean, look, we there was one here for 15 years that had an ego you would not believe as a head coach. So I think he's a guy that could adapt, and I think, look, this is an organization that was the first team to call Deshaun Watson once the issues with the legalities with the massage situation had cleared itself up legally. So they weren't worried about a PR hit with that, which could have been an even more interesting PR hit because he was going to be suspended, and it could have been arguably on the same. Well, I don't know if it was on the same level, but still, he was a tough player or a tough person to sign on to at that point, and they were willing to do it. And I think Gruden somewhat falls in that same somewhat category. So it really would just be a matter of, is he best for your organization? Because I can talk yourself into and out of the scandal. You can go two ways with it, and they could just bypass it all just because of that, or you can look past that and really look at the football aspect of it. And the truth of the matter is, he just hasn't been that great of a football coach in a really, really long time. And I would love to see the Saints do some due diligence and really start to look at some names. And I wouldn't have a problem if there's a dark horse we're not even thinking of right now, an unknown assistant that is just not capturing the headlines, but he's really, really good. I would love to see the Saints attack that as well. So I think we're in agreement here. Got no problem if they want to look at it, but I do think ultimately it's just not what's best for the Saints right now.
Especially because this roster is not very good, and we saw that, throughout the course of this year, minus those first 2 weeks of the season. Gruden inherited a Super Bowl roster, and he turned them into a Super Bowl team. Bringing him here, you'd have to have a lot of patience with him. And granted, that's going to be the case with any coach you bring in. Yep. No coach is going to come here and turn this team around in a year or two. You're going to have to be bought into that guy, and you're going to have a lot of patience with him. But there's a lot of cons to bringing in Jon Gruden. I will mention one pro. One good thing about Jon Gruden potentially coming to New Orleans, Jon Gruden does not seem like the type of coach that would settle for being micromanaged. Jon Gruden seems like the type of coach that would want to make a lot of the decisions and a lot of the draft picks, especially, all the draft analysis he did with ESPN. he would want to have a hold of this franchise. Jon Gruden, or any head coach, but in this case it's Jon Gruden, having more control of this franchise means Mickey Loomis has less control of this franchise. Yeah. A lot of the things that Mickey Loomis has done that we've talked about at length on this podcast, I don't think he would be able to get away with a guy like Jon Gruden here, because Jon Gruden will want a lot of control in himself. So maybe that could work towards the Saints' benefits in some ways, but again, you got to weigh the pros, you got to weigh the cons, and you got to ask yourself, is it worth it? And I just still don't think it is.
Yeah, I think that's ultimately where I land with it. I just think there's some young up-and-coming guys that I'd love to see. I think there's some innovative, fresh ideas out there that I would love to see. There's some – I'm just ready. I'm just ready. I want to see this organization, if they're going to go outside the organization, really go – maybe do something outside the box. So we'll see when it ultimately happens. Again, we're not jumping the gun. That report did not say the Saints are interested in interviewing him. I want to make that point perfectly clear, because I don't want to say Loomis has got Jon Gruden on the phone right now. They're going to interview him. That was not stated in that report. But it was enough of the Saints were connected enough to that report certainly for us. It was worthy of a podcast. How much time we got left?
About a minute.
Less than a minute here. All right. So I'm heading to Tampa tomorrow. That'll be interesting. I do not foresee a Saints victory. But it'd be nice that they could spoil Tampa Bay's plans. But I think Tampa Bay's going to run away with this one.
Yeah, Tampa, it's a win-and-in situation for them when it comes to getting into the playoffs. Mike Evans is chasing some contracts incentives plus another 1,000-yard season. Mm-hmm. They're coming off a blowout against the Carolina Panthers. You'd love to see the Saints end the season on a high note like they did last year, but I just think between injuries and how hot this Bucs team is right now, there's probably going to be too much going against them.
Last year, this was arguably their best game of the season when they went to Tampa on New Year's and really dominated that game. It was closer than it needed to be, but they actually dominated that game. So it really was a good game out of Raymond James Stadium. All right, we got to get out of here. For Andre Johnson Jr., I am Sean Fazende. Happy New Year. We'll catch you guys next time on Overtime.